Well, initially the idea of this was that she would go into some sort of subterranean situation, not to get too Jungian about it, but the idea was that she was going beneath something, and we had looked at different areas in and around Berlin that were extremely exciting, but were probably too considered, and that everything shifted, wildly. So. Without unpacking it too much, because it's probably not constructive to do that. That was the idea behind it, which is that there would be a kind of a step in this direction at that point in the film.
I think that the fact that she identified with that word, that rather than saying that I'm her mother or I'm her parent, showed her lack of distinction along gender lines. And I didn't think about Tár's gender at all. I mean, this is, a fantasy to that extent, and that there's not, we've just had a concertmaster, the first female concertmaster in 141 years appointed at the BPO. So clearly, Tár in this position, Lydia Tár, is a fantasy. But I think it was about her identifying with a certain authoritarian figure in that. But I thought there was a massive clue about her self-identification in your choice of words, Todd, in the script were so laser sharp that you lent into any clue like that you'd find that would unlock another facet of the character.
And there's a tiny clue in her personal space in her residence when she's sitting at her desk. There's a coffee mug made by Petra that says "Dad" on it.
Yeah.
So that's also her relationship in terms of the two parenting of this child.
Mm. She understands. She's a pianist, so she understands the black and the white.
Right.
It's quite binary.
Well, it's more important that they know what they're talking about, and yes, it's very inside conversation. The way that if we were sports people, we would talk about teams. But it's more about their investment in what they're talking about and how it activates either of them. In terms of the audience, it's irrelevant whether they actually know what the references are that they're making. They're colleagues, and this is the way they relate, and only colleagues such as these know how to talk to each other and feel comfortable talking to each other in this manner, and that's really what's important.
Mm-hmm.
Wim Wenders, yeah. You always think of Berlin as flat, or when you think about Chantal Ackermann's conversations with Anna, it's all flat light. So you were right, Berlin's beautiful in flat light, and so we went to great trouble to do that. So we started inside in September, and we worked our way out until it was safe to look out the windows, and then we took her outside, only at the very end.
When I first started in the film industry, there were discussions about, obviously, the way whether an actress was sexy enough, whether she was beautiful enough, and whether we'd fall in love with her or she'd be sympathetic enough. And this word was bandied around about luminosity, the kind of the quality of light that a woman gave off. The conversation's never had about men. And I think that there's a current trap that women can fall into where they have to be noble and pure and good and self-sacrificing, and their character teaches us something.
Right.
And I think that, the experience of being women women are not a monolith. We're made up. We are capricious. We are, we do unpalatable things. We are flawed, and we fail, and we make missteps, and we misuse authority just in the way that any other human being does. And I think that if this was the only film that was ever made about a woman, then maybe it would have to represent something, but it's not. And you just need to look at the suite of films that are being made, even in the last 2 or 3 years, that experience, the multifaceted nature of being alive as a female. It's a very, very redundant way to look at the film.
Interessant. Darüber habe ich jetzt gar nicht nachgedacht. Also das fand ich auch das Wunderschöne in der Art und Weise, wie das Skript auch schon geschrieben ist, dass das 2 Frauen sind, gar keine Rolle spielt. Dass es so eine große Normalität hat Und das wollte ich den beiden auch so schenken, dass man nicht immer das Gefühl hat, fühlen sich permanent beobachtet und beurteilt aufgrund dessen, dass sie ein lesbisches Paar sind. Das spielt eigentlich in dem Film nicht wirklich eine große Rolle. Sharon weiß ja von vielem nicht. Also man kann zumindest drüber nachdenken, wie viel sie erfahren hat, ob sie Tár zu diesem Zeitpunkt, wo wir die beiden kennenlernen, lässt sie ja nicht mehr so wirklich rein. Also sie bespricht die Dinge nicht wirklich offen mit ihr. Sie ist so ein bisschen mit sich, ich hatte immer das Gefühl, die Szenen, die wir haben, da versucht Sharon sich so ranzutasten und ihr irgendwie wieder nahe zu kommen. Da rutscht was weg und sie weiß nicht ganz genau, wie sie das einfangen kann. Andererseits ist es auch eine Situation, die sie bestimmt schon erlebt hat, weil wenn man mit einem Genie zusammen ist, gibt es eben auch diese absolute Versenkung und dieses sich nur mit dem Projekt, das man da vor sich hat, beschäftigen und alles andere fällt erstmal hintan. Also ich glaube, in dieser Situation ist Sharon. Aber natürlich fand ich auch interessant zu sehen, wer sind denn die Menschen, die sich gerne, dieses Machtmenschen sozusagen, umgeben. Und gerade in so einem rigiden, hierarchischen System wie einem Orchester und dieser Institution, der Lydia Tár vorsteht, was macht das mit diesem kreativen Menschen? Und kann die dann so ein System eigentlich überhaupt verändern? Will denn das Orchester überhaupt, dass man die Dinge verändert? Weil sie haben sich ja alle so hingekämpft. Dann soll das, also man denkt über so vieles nach, was hält einen machtvollen Menschen in dieser Position? Warum dauert das oftmals so lange, bis Dinge aufgedeckt werden? Wobei hier ja so wunderschön ist, dass man gar nicht genau weiß, was nun tatsächlich eigentlich los war, was eigentlich passiert war. Das ist ja auch das Schöne. Also Sharon kann nicht genau wissen, also sie wartet deswegen, glaube ich, so lange, weil der Punkt, der sie wirklich tief verletzt, ist der, dass sie das Vertrauen verloren hat von Lydia. Und das kann sie nicht mehr herstellen. Also es ist das Erste, und es ist eben auch, wie sie sagt, eine transactional relationship auf eine gewisse Art und Weise, weil sie beide diese großen, verantwortlichen, machtvollen Positionen im Orchester haben. Dass wenn du mich nicht mehr reinlässt in diese Momente, wo es gefährlich wird und ich vollkommen machtlos dem ausgeliefert bin, wie sie ja auch sagt, sie wird überrascht davon, dann muss ich mich zurückziehen. Und das ist der Moment, wo sie die Entscheidung trifft, die Beziehung zu beenden. Aber es hatte für mich überhaupt nichts mit der sexuellen Orientierung zu tun. Nein, ich war schon eine Deutsche. Wir haben über den Namen, wir haben dann irgendwann drüber nachgedacht und er meinte, nein, das ist einfach so. Das war der Vater Engländer oder Amerikaner oder so, aber sie ist in Deutschland aufgewachsen. Naja, ich habe schon das Gefühl, die erste Geige kann ja auch den Ton mitgestalten sozusagen. Du bist ja als Konzertmeisterin dafür verantwortlich, das, wonach der Dirigent oder die Dirigentin sucht, zu übersetzen. Also wenn sie sagt, ich suche einen gewissen, es muss irgendwie härter, es muss irgendwie metallener sein oder so, dann muss die Konzertmeisterin wissen, lasst uns doch mit dem Bogen spielen oder lasst uns das irgendwie mehr, wie ich ja auch sage, zackiger und so weiter. Also sie ist die Übersetzerin für den Ton, für den Klang. Ja? Und das ist erstmal eine aufregende Position. Lydia in diesem Moment, sie ist ja, man lernt sie kennen zu einem Zeitpunkt, wo sie eigentlich am Höhepunkt ihrer Karriere ist. Und ist das dann das Ende? Also sie arbeitet an ihrer Legende. Was kommt denn dann? Und dann sieht man eine junge Person, die gerade loslegt, die vollkommen frei ist irgendwie auch von Erfahrung und von Dingen, die man schon erlebt hat, wo man das vielleicht, also so, ne? Man ist unbeschwert. Und das ist aufregend. Und davon will man ein bisschen was haben, dieses Unverschämte, was in der Jugend ja auch liegt. Und das ist das, was sie wieder anregt auf einmal. Auf einmal kann sie wieder Musik schreiben. Also das ist es eher, was die Gefahr für Sharon ist. Nicht so sehr Beamte, da habe ich sie nicht verstanden, aber sie ist die etwas solidere von den beiden natürlich, deswegen ist Lydia auch mit ihr. Aber gleichzeitig hatte ich schon das Gefühl, dass die musikalisch miteinander fliegen.
Yes, I was also involved in the sounds because I started very early. Like I was the second person to join the project after Cate, and so I had a really long and extended dialogue with Todd about what the role of the music was in the film, and you know what it wasn't, and how it felt to rehearse music, how it feels to compose music. Like, you know, it was so the musical and the sound aspect was very closely related. Well, specifically, for example, when Todd was writing a script, there was the sound of his father-in-law's medical alarm that was constantly going off that we actually hear in the he brought into the script, and then he brought this medical alarm to my studio. So I incorporated the sound of this alarm that he was hearing in the script into the music that then we also used in the sound design of the film. So all these elements were really closely tied together, like, you know, from the script to the music to the performances. And for me, it's really important that when I work on the music of a film, that I have a really good psychological understanding of the whole sound world of the film, because I think the music and the sound, we're working with the same understanding, we're working through the ears and the auditory perception. So I think the more these elements can work together, the more it can support the narrative of the film.
Although that was really kind of you to say, I was 19 when we shot this movie. I guess the pandemic kind of decided to bless us a little bit, and kind of we could film for that very short window. But I hadn't had an in-person cello lesson for 1.5 years. It was just on Zoom. I just kind of started my bachelor's, so I would say that Olga's meant to be slightly older than I was at the time, so I would say it was more kind of trying to live up to that kind of standard and those expectations, you know. I guess winning an orchestral audition is no easy job, and it was almost as stressful as doing or maybe more so stressful as doing an orchestral audition, because you know it's going to be in this movie forever. So I remember when I was recording the Tchaikovsky, I was like, ah! But it was a really, really great experience, a real baptism of fire in how to be professional in a very difficult situation very early on in my career. I learned a tremendous amount, and it was so inspiring to work with all these amazing people. I'm so lucky for this opportunity and so grateful. Yeah.
I'm very different from Lydia Tár.
Let's just put that out there. She is a lovely person.
And I think, you know, my approach to music is a very personal one. So the way that I compose and the way that I work is very, I keep people very close, and I'm very precious with the people that I let into my musical space. So I'm definitely, I don't share her need to kind of for this outward, bombastic way of presenting music, but my approach is definitely much more in the way that she's composing, which is more fragile and more intimate. But that part of her I can relate to, and that's also the part that I was probably the most interested in this character, is because she has these very different parts of her character, and I think that's also a really wonderful exploration of a character in that way, that you're not being told what's right or wrong, or you're not being told that she she is so purely like this and purely not like that. She's a very uncomfortable character in many ways, and there are definitely lots of parts that I wouldn't want to be able to see myself in, but there are definitely parts, and I think that's also what makes the film so interesting, is that I think we can probably all relate to certain parts of how she is behaving, even though maybe it's something that we just think and we'd never actually act out, or at least we have we're kind of forced to make up our mind about what we feel about these situations that she enters and how she behaves and how she conducts herself, you know. So she's just a really interesting character, I think, really, really, whether you like her or not, or agree with her or not, and I think most people probably won't agree with her fully, or at least I hope not, but, you know, she's definitely a really interesting character to mirror yourself towards, you know.